Hello everyone. This is George from Invensis Learning. Welcome to our YouTube channel. I am sure you guys might have heard of COBIT Framework. In today's session, we're going to have a brief tutorial about COBIT Framework. So, without any further delay, let's get started. We will begin this session by discussing a little about what is IT governance. Next, we will move further on what are IT governance frameworks and what are the different types of IT governance frameworks. Post that, we will take a look at what is COBIT Framework, and what is COBIT Framework. Moving on, we will discuss the objectives of COBIT Framework, then COBIT Framework Process Model, then COBIT Goals Cascade, and then about COBIT Enablers. We will then talk about COBIT Framework Principles, and key management practices involved in the implementation of COBIT Framework. And finally, we will end this session by discussing a case study, look into advantages of COBIT Framework, and prospects of COBIT Framework. I hope the agenda is clear to you guys. We will now begin the presentation, and understand what the IT governance program is. So what is IT governance? IT governance can be said as a subcomponent or subset of corporate governance, where corporate governance includes various regulations, laws, processes, principles and systems based on which an organization is monitored, regulated and operated. The IT governance, on the other hand, helps organizations to align IT strategy and business strategy and measure the performance of IT in achieving organizational goals. IT governance helps to ensure that investments in IT strategy generate business value to the organization. Now that we have seen what an IT governance program is, let us now understand what our IT governance framework. So what is IT governance framework? IT governance framework is a pre-designed framework that can tune as per organization's size and needs. What does IT governance do? First, it will determine how your IT department is functioning overall. Secondly, it takes care of the key metrics management needs, and what IT is giving back to the business from its investments. IT governance frameworks work as a blueprint that determine how IT governance can be implemented in an organization. It helps align IT strategy and business strategy to ensure that IT investments support business objectives. By following a framework, companies can produce measurable results towards achieving their strategies and goals. A formal program also considers the stakeholders' interests as well as the needs of staff and the processes they follow. Let us now see how to select the right IT governance framework. Selecting the right framework is crucial, as any wrong judgment here would cause problems in framework implementation. 1. Selecting the right framework depends on the organizational needs, size, structure, and goals. 2. These IT governance frameworks can be implemented individually or combined with another framework. 3. The selected IT governance framework should have a proven success rate in other organizations. When implementing an IT governance program, deciding factors like the role of the IT governance body in the organization, and tools for managing IT governance that can be designed needs to be considered. For this, an in-house or third-party vendor purchase needs to be created. Tools provided by third parties are improving and gaining much interest among organizations. However, when adopting or designing an IT governance tool, there is nothing like one compatible design tool. Organizations need to opt for the tool such that it would improvise the existing governance and improve the standardization of the existing processes. This can be done by simplifying and reducing the administrative workloads, and improve staff performance to optimize the available resources. This in turn drastically cuts down the operating costs of governance. Any organization needs to be aware of its strengths and weaknesses. This helps in selecting the right tools, and match them with the organizational needs. If necessary, the organization should invest in simulating real-time conditions to test the tool comprehensively. Implementing an IT governance program should be designed keeping in mind all the resources, requirements, and objectives of the organization. The organizational needs can be categorized by performance measurement, financial analysis, automation of working processes, and density of workflow. Any organization should ensure that it stays in sync with the organizational goals and objectives, and have a clear vision of the organization's path ahead. Let us now see the different types of IT governance frameworks. They are COBIT or Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies, ITIL or Information Technology Infrastructure Library, COSO or Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, CMMI or Capability Maturity Model Integration, FAIR or Factor Analysis of Information Risk, VAL-IT or Value from IT Investments, SIEM or Security Information and Event Management, ISO 27002 or International Organization for Standardization 27002.
ISO/IEC 38500 to 2015 is International Organization for Standardization or International Electrotechnical Commission 38500 to 2015 Framework. AS 8015-2005 is the Australian standard for corporate governance of information and communication technology. Any organization that needs to comply with regulations related to financial and technological accountability. Implementing an IT governance program requires a lot of time and effort. Some companies may only practice essential IT governance methods, but larger and more regulated organizations have a full-fledged IT governance program. The easiest way to implement an IT governance program is to start with a pre-designed framework. Many frameworks include guides to help organizations phase in an IT governance program with fewer issues. However, the basic procedure to implement an IT governance framework is almost the same. Firstly, the stakeholder needs have to be taken into consideration and taken into account. We then identify the business goals and objectives associated in accordance with the stakeholder needs. Here we send these business goals and objectives to the Management Committee and the IT Department, which further include the Executive Technology Committee and Technology Infrastructure Committee respectively. The Executive Technology Committee ensures IT alignment, reviews and approves the IT strategic plan, whereas the Technology Infrastructure Committee advocates IT security and data center resources and proposes IT support strategies and information security policies and standards. The Management Committee and the IT Department fine-tune these goals and objectives based on the respective regulations and their needs. An analyst here is responsible to provide IT governance by the alignment of IT investments with enterprise business goals, and enable the creation of a governance model to enable and select practices and principles to increase assurance of continuous compliance integration to improve linkages between strategy and execution. The design process is where the framework is updated as per the enterprise's needs, and the last step is the completion of framework design. Now that we have understood how framework is implemented, we will now discuss what is COBIT Framework. COBIT Framework IT strategy and business strategy, and creates a process that can help bridge a gap between IT and other departments. COBIT, when compared to other frameworks, emphasizes risk management, security, and information governance. COBIT Framework refers to control objectives for information and related technologies framework developed by ISACA. It is designed keeping in mind if the framework or model seems natural for the organization. If the framework resonates with the stakeholders, it is only then that it is implemented. It is used to develop, control, and maintain risk and security for organizations worldwide. The main COBIT framework has been created to link business goals with IT operations. It is done by providing certain information metrics as well as maturity models that help integrate the responsibilities of the IT and business aspects in an organization and check the progress. There are two main parameters that are involved in the COBIT framework that help with its scope and operation. They are control and IT control objectives. The control aspect in COBIT is concerned with creating various procedures, policies, practices, and organizational structures. These help companies give assurance to the stakeholders that all the business processes will attain their objectives, as well as prevent any undesirable outcomes by managing IT and enterprise risks. IT control objective is a statement that considers the acceptable results that need to be achieved by implementing the processes created by the control objective that is concerned with IT. COBIT is generally preferred because it defines IT governance as a complete structure in itself instead of it being a part of IT. This helps in including the entire organization and helping maintain security and achieve business objectives. We are now going to see the history of COBIT and all its versions. In 1996, the first version of the framework of COBIT was created. The emphasis was on the information systems or IS audit, and it was created mainly for the IT auditors. The version was named COBIT 1. In 1998, COBIT 2 was developed. It included the introduction of the control activities and control practices in the COBIT framework. After this, in 2000, the third version of the COBIT framework, COBIT 3, was developed. The main update was the incorporation of the management guidelines in the COBIT framework. The third edition online of COBIT was released in the year 2003. Then COBIT 4 was introduced, the fourth edition of the COBIT framework, in 2005. COBIT version 4.1 was developed in the year 2007, however, and is a minor upgradation of COBIT 4. The next version of the COBIT framework, COBIT 5, is introduced in 2012 to align for present-day corporate environment. Organizations have recognized that their daily executive functions need to include IT like any other major part of the business. It is because of this, business and IT functions work so that IT is included within the management and governance approach. The latest version is the COBIT 2019, developed in 2018, which was launched after inputs from many organizations and professionals. COBIT 2019, however, uses 6 principles. COBIT 5 is a comprehensive framework of globally accepted regulations, principles, procedures, practices, analytical tools, and models that can help any organization effectively by addressing critical issues related to the management and governance of information and technology. We are now going to discuss what COBIT 5 framework is. Introduced in 2012, COBIT 5 framework was developed to overcome the shortcomings of the previous COBIT versions. COBIT 5 framework helped to reduce the risks from IT implementations. It addresses all levels of the IT governance framework. It builds on the process models which rationalizes all the working processes. In this slide, we are going to look into the various components of COBIT 5 framework. There are a total of 5 components in the COBIT 5 framework. The first component is framework. The second component is process description. The third component is control objectives. The fourth component is management guidelines. And the last and fifth component is maturity models. We are now going to see each component in detail. First is framework. It organizes IT governance objectives and links them to business requirements by ensuring good practices of IT domains and processes are implemented simultaneously. Second is process description. A reference process model that is followed during the implementation, which is available for everyone working in the enterprise. It maps the responsibility areas of plan, build, run, and monitor (PBRM). Third is control objectives. It provides a complete set of high-level requirements to be considered by the management for effective control of each IT process. The fourth component is management guidelines. These help to assign responsibility to agree on objectives and measure performance to illustrate the relationship between each individual process. The final and fifth component is maturity models. It is used to access maturity and capability for each process, and help to address gaps in the implementation of the processes. Now that we have covered the components of COBIT 5 framework, let us now see the objectives of COBIT 5 framework. Governance objectives and management objectives are the two main objectives of COBIT 5 framework. Let's discuss governance objectives. Governance objectives include EDM, evaluate, which involves agreeing and identifying objectives that need to be achieved, direct, which includes decision making and prioritization, monitor, that includes compliance and performance against objectives. Let's discuss management objectives. Management objectives include PBRM, which is plan, build, run, and monitor. APO, also called as align, plan, and organize, involves organization, strategy, and supporting activities for IT. BAE, also called as build, acquire, and implement, involves the definition, acquisition, and implementation of IT solutions. DSS, also called as deliver, service, and support, is the operational delivery and support of IT services. MEA, also called as monitor, evaluate, and assess, is the most important part, which involves performance and conformance monitoring of IT. Areas where COBIT can be put to use: global organizations, associations and clubs, multinational businesses, national and local governments, small and medium enterprises, charitable and non-profit organizations. We are now going to discuss the COBIT 5 framework process model. This process model acts as an architectural model for COBIT 5 framework. COBIT 5 framework process reference model involves firstly processes for the governance of enterprise IT and secondly processes for management of enterprise IT. The governance layer has 5 processes under EDM, that is evaluate, direct, and monitor, which are EDM-O1 to ensure governance framework setting and maintenance, EDM-O2 to manage strategy, EDM-O3 to ensure risk optimization, EDM-O4 to ensure resource optimization, EDM-O5 to ensure stakeholder transparency. The management layer has 32 processes under APO, BAE, DSS and MEA. Under APO or align, plan and organize, we have 13 processes, which are APO-O1 to manage the IT management framework, APO-O2 to manage strategy, APO-O3 to manage enterprise architecture, APO-O4 to manage innovation, APO-O5 to manage the portfolio, APO-O6 to manage budget and costs, APO-O7 to manage human resources, APO-O8 to manage relationships, APO-O9 to manage service agreements, APO-10 to manage suppliers, APO-11 to manage quality, APO-12 to manage risk, APO-13 to manage security. Under BAE or build, acquire and implement, we have 10 processes, which are BAE-O1 to manage programs and projects, BAE-O2 to manage requirements definition, BAE-O3 to manage solutions identification and build, BAE-O4 to manage availability and capacity, BAE-O5 to manage organizational change enablement, BAE-O6 to manage changes, BAE-O7 to manage change acceptance and transitioning, BAE-O8 to manage knowledge, BAE-09 to manage assets. BAE-10 to manage configuration. Under DSS or Deliver, Service, and Support we have 6 processes which are DSS-O1 to manage operations. DSS-O2 to manage service requests and incidents. DSS-O3 to manage problems. DSS-O4 to manage continuity. DSS-O5 to manage security services. DSS-O6 to manage business process controls. Under MEA or Monitor, Evaluate, and Assess we have 3 processes which are MEA-O1 to monitor, evaluate and assess performance and conformance. MEA-O2 to monitor, evaluate and assess the system of internal control. MEA-O3 to monitor, evaluate and assess compliance with external requirements. COBIT 5 is not a prescriptive model but rather, it delivers the implementation of management and governance processes within organizations. Let us see the salient features of the COBIT 5 Framework Process Reference Model. COBIT 5 Framework Process Reference Model has 2 layers, namely governance and management layers. Governance layers has 5 processes under EDM, i.e. evaluate, direct, and monitor. Management layer has 32 processes under APO, BAE, DSS and MEA. This process model is the key element in understanding the design and implementation of COBIT 5 Framework. Let us discuss each layer now. The EDM layer or evaluate, direct and monitor layer is responsible for ensuring governance framework setting and maintenance are incorporated. It analyzes and puts forth the requirements for the governance of enterprise IT. It helps in maintaining the enabling parameters, principles, practices and processes. The next one is APO layer or align, plan and organize layer. The APO layer is responsible for maintaining the IT management framework. Its area of expertise is in handling the management directives. It clarifies and maintains the governance of organizations' IT vision and mission. It helps to incorporate the set of procedures to manage information and the use of IT in the enterprise. Supports governance objectives on par with the policies and principles of the organization. The next layer is the BAE layer or build, acquire and implement layer. The BAE layer is responsible for managing programs and projects. Its area of expertise is in handling the management directives. It manages all the projects and programs from the portfolio with respect to the business strategy in a phased manner. It closes the task after a proper review once the implementation process is completed. It takes control and initiative and executes the programs and projects after careful planning. The layer we are going to discuss now is DSS or Deliver, Service, and Support layer. The DSS layer is responsible for managing operations. It executes and helps in coordinating the operational activities and procedures that are needed to deliver IT services. Its area of expertise is in handling the management directives. This also includes the execution of all predefined processes and activities that are needed for operational procedures. The MEA layer is responsible for monitoring, evaluating, and assessing process goals and performance. Its area of expertise is in handling the management directives. It evaluates all IT, business, and process metrics and goals by collecting and validating them. It monitors if the processes are performing as per the conformance metrics and goals. It ensures that the procedures are followed in a timely manner. Now we are going to discuss the various principles of COBIT 5 framework. The principles of COBIT 5 can showcase the advantages the framework brings to any enterprise that implements it. The primary goal of any framework is to enhance the value of the organization's final output to its end users, and COBIT 5 helps companies achieve that. COBIT 5 has come with many benefits to organizations, and COBIT 5 principles should be adopted to manage a successful IT governance and management framework. There are a total of 5 COBIT 5 principles. The 5 main principles of COBIT 5 framework are primarily focused on meeting the needs of all stakeholders while handling governance, using a single integrated network with a holistic approach. Let us now see the COBIT 5 framework principles. First one is meeting stakeholder needs. Second one is covering the enterprise end-to-end. Third one is enabling holistic approach. Fourth one is applying single integrated framework. The last and fifth one is separating governance from management. So the first COBIT 5 framework principle is meeting stakeholder needs. It provides all required processes and other enablers to support business value creation, through the use of IT as per the stakeholder needs. The second COBIT 5 framework principle is covering the enterprise end-to-end. Integrate governance of enterprise IT into enterprise governance, which includes all functions and processes within the enterprise. The third COBIT 5 framework principle is enabling holistic approach. COBIT 5 framework defines a set of enablers to support the implementations of comprehensive governance along with the management system for enterprise IT that requires a holistic approach taking into account several interacting components. The fourth COBIT 5 framework principle is applying single integrated framework. COBIT 5 framework is a single integrated framework and it aligns with other relevant laws and regulations standard and framework. The fifth COBIT 5 framework principle is separating governance from management. The COBIT 5 framework makes a clear distinction between governance and management, and these two encompass different types of activities. Now that we have discussed COBIT 5 framework principles, we will now move on to COBIT 5 framework goals cascade. The COBIT 5 framework goals cascade has three major steps. The three steps are: first is define, second is transform, third and last one is translate. Let us now look into COBIT 5 framework goals cascade and what the three steps do in COBIT 5 framework goals cascade. COBIT 5 framework defines required processes and enablers to support value creation through the use of IT. This permits in transforming stakeholder needs into an actionable strategy. The COBIT 5 goals cascade is the procedure used to translate stakeholder needs into enabler goals, customized enterprise goals, and IT-related goals. We are going to understand the architecture of the goals cascade now. COBIT 5 framework defines required processes and enablers to support value creation through the use of IT. This permits in transforming stakeholder needs into an actionable strategy. The COBIT 5 goals cascade is the procedure used to translate stakeholder needs into enabler goals, customized enterprise goals, and IT-related goals. This alignment of needs to goals is an essential step towards achieving enterprises' needs, and with the right IT solutions and services, these can be applied at different levels. The goals cascade works through the following steps. Step 1. The stakeholders' needs are influenced by stakeholder drivers, which are various factors such as changes in strategy, the latest trend in technologies, and the business environment. Step 2. Stakeholder needs can be seen from a set of enterprise goals. The COBIT 5 goals cascade organizes these into the 4 balanced scorecard dimensions, with 17 generic goals that can also be easily linked to specific organizational goals. Step 3. Generally, enterprise goals can only be achieved if the IT-related goals are met. In the goals cascade, each of the 17 enterprise goals is linked to many relevant IT-related goals. There are 17 IT-related goals, and they are also organized into the 4 balanced scorecard dimensions. Step 4. To achieve IT-related goals, a set of enablers must be applied successfully. One of these enablers is processes. Similar to earlier steps, each IT-related goal is then mapped to one or more processes. The COBIT 5 framework has, however, a total of 37 processes. The initial step an organization should always take when using the goals cascade is to tune the mapping, taking into account its specific scenario. In other words, each enterprise should build its own goals cascade, compare it with COBIT 5 framework, and then refine it. For using the COBIT 5 goals cascade in practice. From the previous disclaimer, it is obvious that, for example, the enterprise may wish to translate the strategic priorities into a specific weight or importance for each of the enterprise goals. Validate the mappings of the goals cascade, taking into account its specific environment, industry, etc. We will discuss COBIT 5 framework enablers. Enablers are a significant part of implementing a COBIT 5 framework approach. Using the list of enablers as a checklist helps to ensure that they are delivered in place that are vital in bringing out the most of the guidance. The COBIT 5 framework consists of 7 enablers. These enablers determine if the management and governance of enterprise IT will work. The 7 enablers of COBIT 5 framework are: principles, policies, and frameworks; processes; organizational structures; culture, ethics, and behaviors; information; services, infrastructure, and applications; people, skills, and competencies. We will now see each enabler. The first one here is principles, policies, and frameworks. These are essential and practical guidelines that are necessary to reach the desired result within the organization for day-to-day management. The second enabler is processes. COBIT 5 framework describes processes as a set of practices designed to bring about a specific output in support of organizational IT targets and achieve certain objectives. The third enabler is organizational structures. The critical decision-making elements in an organization are the executive board or the IT steering committee. The fourth enabler is culture, ethics, and behaviors. Having a culture that supports the organizational goal, backed up by the right behaviors and attitudes, is a crucial factor in the implementation process of COBIT in achieving the desired outcome. The fifth enabler is information. Information is essential to the organization, but having the right information to concede for good governance, management, and use of that information is also crucial. The sixth enabler is services, infrastructure, and applications. The infrastructure, technology, and applications that are needed to convey the information to the organization. These play a key role given the integration of IT and management. The seventh and last enabler is people, skills, and competencies. Having competent people in the right areas, Making decisions and execute processes to deliver organizational objectives and goals is the key. We will now discuss the key management practices involved in COBIT 5 framework. Compliance includes rules, standards, policies, requirements, regulations, transparency, and law. COBIT 5 framework provides key management practices or KMP for ensuring IT compliance with external compliance as relevant to the enterprise. The key management practices are: first is identify external compliance requirements. Second is confirm external compliance. Third is optimize response to the external environment. Fourth is obtain assurance of external compliance. We will now discuss each key management practice in COBIT 5 framework. The first is identify external compliance requirements. Diagnose and check for changes in international and local laws, regulations, and other external requirements that must be complied with from an IT perspective. The second is confirm external compliance. Confirm with policies, principles, standards, procedures, and methodologies with legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements. The third is optimize response to the external environment. Analyze and adjust policies, procedures, principles, standards, and methodologies to ensure that legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements are addressed and communicated. The fourth is obtain assurance of external compliance. To obtain and report assurance of compliance and adherence with policies, principles, standards, procedures, and methodologies to confirm that corrective actions to address compliance gaps are closed in a timely manner. We will now discuss the key metrics for assessing compliance in COBIT 5 framework. The first one is compliance with external laws and regulations. The compliance with external laws and regulations can be monitored from cost of IT noncompliance, including settlements and fines, the number of IT-related noncompliance issues reported to the board or causing public comment or embarrassment, the number of noncompliance issues relating to a contractual agreement with IT service providers, coverage of compliance assessments. The second one is IT compliance with internal policies. For compliance with internal policies, we need to check the number of incidents related to noncompliance policy, percentage of stakeholders who understand policies, percentage of policies supported by effective standards and working practices, frequency of policies reviewed and updated. Metrics contain the enterprise goals and IT-related goals, with sample metrics that can be used to measure the achievement of each goal. These metrics are samples, and every enterprise should carefully review the list, decide on relevant and achievable metrics for its own environment, and design its own scorecard system. In addition to the metrics below, process goals and metrics are contained in the detailed process descriptions. We will now look into the key management practices or KMP to be implemented in COBIT 5 framework for IT-derived business evaluation. The first one is evaluate value optimization, which continuously assess IT-related investments and services and assets to understand the likelihood of achieving the objectives and delivering value at a reasonable cost. Identify and decide on any amendments that are to be made and inform the management to improve and add value. The second one is direct value optimization, where direct value management involves principles and practices to enable optimal value realization from IT-enabled investments throughout the business lifecycle. The third one is monitor value optimization, which can monitor the key goals and metrics to understand the extent to which any business is generating the desired value and benefits the enterprise from IT-enabled investments and services. After monitoring, we have to identify significant issues and consider corrective actions. Let us now see the advantages of COBIT 5 framework. The main advantages of COBIT 5 framework are: creates optimal value for IT and helps to govern and manage IT in a holistic manner. Maintains a balance between realizing benefits and optimizing risk levels and resource use. Enables enterprises to achieve their objectives for the governance and management of enterprise IT. We will now look at a case study and understand the scenario where it was used and the results after COBIT 5 implementation. ENTSO-E was established in 2008 and given legal mandates in 2009 by the European Union's third legislative package for the internal energy market to achieve liberalizing gas and electricity markets in the EU. This required closer cooperation among Europe's TSOs to support the implementation of the EU energy policy. To achieve Europe's energy and climate policy objectives, there was a dire need to implement a framework that would make this possible. The IT director of ENTSO-E, or the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, decided to implement COBIT 5 framework at the organization beginning in 2014. After 2 years, with a successful collaboration between the internal IT department, the business organization, and the external consultants, COBIT 5 framework came into action. Taking a practical approach towards implementing a program for enterprise IT governance based on COBIT 5, ENTSO-E focused on prioritizing the processes, developing these processes, and overcoming practical issues during the implementation of the COBIT 5 framework. ENTSE-O in Europe caters to the needs of various things. There are 42 electricity transmission system operators, also called TSOs, from 35 countries across Europe. ENTSE-O serves 532 million citizens. It handles 1,020 gigawatts of power generation. It takes care of over 313,000 kilometers of transmission lines. The implementation of COBIT 5 framework is a 6-step procedure. Step 1, establish business drivers relevant to the IT processes. Step 2, set up the IT processes in the enterprise. Step 3, perform a prior selection of target processes based on the above selection. Step 4, confirm the prior selection of target processes with the project sponsor and key stakeholders. Step 5, finalize the list of processes. Step 6, document the scoping methodology in the IT strategy document. After success implementation of COBIT 5 framework for 2 years. There was a 50% implementation in policies and standards, a 30% implementation in people, and 80% implementation in suppliers. After implementation, the results were evaluated. This is done by going back to the original governance structure put in place. The review was completed considering all major IT suppliers. All data center activities moved to a single permanent supplier. All application operations moved to 2 or more permanent suppliers. Supporting the TSO members in the best possible way by the IT organization. Maintain the size of the IT department, the number of employees, the ratio of internal versus external employees, and a revived focus on activities related to data management development. A final review to check if the enterprise goals are being achieved. The percentage of goals achieved for each of the 37 COBIT processes was done, and another calculation was performed through the IT-related goals to arrive at the achievement of all 17 generic enterprise goals. This report shows where development has been made after 2 years with respect to the business goals. Here business department is quite satisfied with the overall result, as the development in the organization was startling. Let us now see the prospects of COBIT 5 framework. There are many good prospects of COBIT 5 framework. COBIT 5 framework has great prospects for professionals who are in business management, chief executives, IT/auditors, internal auditors, information security and IT practitioners, consultants, and members of IT/management. It is also beneficial for professionals in IT managers, business process owners, business managers. COBIT 5 framework certified professionals are highly sought in industry. Managers across the world face new challenges every day in their job roles. New user requirements, industry-specific regulations, and risks come every day to challenge the stability of an organization. With the improvement in technology, enhancing the value of an intellectual property, risk management, and data security, and assuring compliance along with IT management and governance has attained a whole new level. It is very important as well as crucial to take care of all these factors. Here, we will find that COBIT is the best guide to reach perfection. COBIT is the only framework based on the enterprise IT available in the market that offers such huge advantages. It helps all sizes of organizations to maintain their performance and focus on their growth. The reasons why you must use COBIT for your organizations is that it maintains high-quality information for supporting governance and business decisions. It helps in achieving strategic goals through innovative and effective use of IT methodology. It helps in achieving operational excellence through reliable and efficient application of information technology. It keeps in check IT-related risk at an acceptable level and helps in optimizing the cost of IT-related services. It supports the compliance with contractual agreements and policies which are relevant to regulations and policies and laws. These are some key points that might help you in choosing this COBIT framework. As we have already discussed previously, COBIT 5 is the most preferred technology if we talk about IT governance and management. Implementing COBIT 5 framework is costly and extremely complicated. Analysts need meticulous planning and expertise to implement it in an enterprise. There are many advantages of COBIT, but there is still a lot of scope to make it cost-effective and simplify its implementation process. Now that more and more organizations are looking to implement IT in their portfolio, factors like these play a major role in the coming future. COBIT is highly regarded as one of its kind comprehensive IT framework and has excellent brand image globally. However, there are no direct competitors with similar products that include IT audit, cybersecurity, IT risk, IT governance and business principles. Key industry trends of crowdsourcing and open sourcing solutions improve relevance of products. Invensis Learning provides live online instructor-led training for all levels of COBIT 5 framework certification courses. The first is COBIT 5 Foundation course. The second is COBIT 5 Implementation course. The third is COBIT 5 Assessor Course. Invensis Learning Advantage includes interactive instructor-led certification training programs. These are either accredited by respective governing bodies or in line with their guidelines. Lifetime access to Learning Management System or LMS. Access to live classes, assignments, and industry-driven case studies. Highly qualified, certified, and accredited trainers. Why you need COBIT 5 training. Today, enterprises across the globe are vulnerable to security breaches that can prove to be a costly affair if not addressed in an efficient manner. COBIT 5 Foundation is a course that is ideal for professionals who are looking to gain comprehensive understanding of IT security and governance best practices. As a COBIT 5 certified professional, you will be able to showcase your understanding of the fundamentals of COBIT 5 terminology and processes and supporting toolset that allows enterprises to bridge the gap between control requirements, technical issues and business risks. After COBIT 5 Foundation training from Invensis Learning, you will understand the principles and concepts of COBIT 5. You will become proficient with IT management issues organizations face today and would be aware of how to use COBIT to respond to these challenges. You will have hands-on experience with the elements of COBIT 5 and would be able to recommend applications of COBIT 5 for organization-wide projects. After COBIT 5 implementation training from Invensis Learning, you will understand how to apply the elements of COBIT 5 across an enterprise. You would have mastered the approaches to implementing the governance of enterprise information technology or GEIT, based on a continual improvement life cycle. You would be able to demonstrate the understanding of how COBIT 5 should be tailored to suit an enterprise's specific needs. After COBIT 5 assessor training from Invensis Learning, you would be able to demonstrate mastery in understanding and performing a formal process capability assessment. You would be able to ensure stronger and reliable control over internal processes and provide stakeholders a clear line of sight into process capabilities, allowing IT leaders to redirect or liberate resources, from service delivery to designing and implementing technology-enabled, information-rich, and transformed business process, to increase innovation and value for the enterprise. The COBIT 5 certification benefits are: universally recognized credential in business analysis, increases trust among recruiters hiring IT security and governance professionals. Many organizations only allow people with COBIT 5 certificate to apply for a job as IT security and governance professionals. COBIT 5 certification exams are managed by ISACA. It is responsible for the certification process and controls the best practices in it. Invensis Learning provides live instructor-led exam prep training that is aligned with the certification exam. Invensis Learning provides live online/offline COBIT 5 certification training programs that can be customized for enterprise teams who wish to train their employees on specific aspects of their job processes or responsibilities. Our expert COBIT 5 trainers have rich domain experience to provide training in the language of your preference. Your teams will get access to a high-quality COBIT 5 course material provided by ISACA can be customized through an SME based on your requirements. It will enable your teams to do their best by following industry standard approaches.